We're diving straight into another big tech earnings report here. Apple's fourth quarter results, they are just hitting the wire. Let's take a look at what we got here. Q4 EPS 185. So the street was at 177. Top line, Q4 revenue 102.47 billion. Street was at 102.19 billion. I'm looking for greater China revenue, always in focus. That looks like 14.49 billion. The street was closer to 16.43 billion. iPhone revenue, there it is, 49.03 billion. That's up 6% year over year. I don't see a compare yet on that. Looking at others, let's look at Mac revenue, 8.73 billion. Street was at 8.55 billion. Wearables, home, and accessories, 9.01 billion versus around 8.6. Services, also in focus always. Higher growth, higher margin, 28.75 billion. She was at 28.18 billion. As always, we would look for guidance on the call. Apple not giving specific formal guidance as we know typically, but they do give greater detail about what's to come for that all-important holiday quarter. The numbers are just hitting the tape right now. Give me that instant analysis and reaction. What do you make of it?
Yeah, so Josh, thanks for having me. I'd say, just on just looking at it, initially here, I think you look at the top line was fine, bottom line was fine. I'd say definitely a little bit light in terms of iPhones and definitely a miss as far as expectations in China. And, I'd say on the positive side of things, services did exceed our expectations. We were looking for about 13% growth, and it looks like it got a couple points above that. So, I think there were some good positives and negatives. I think really if I were to, pinpoint one thing that seemed like it was a pretty big miss, it was that China number.
And what do you listen? We're going to listen to the call, obviously, Angelo, but what do you chalk that up to? But obviously, for an Apple investor, you make a beeline to China every time because it's that key link in the supply chain. It's a key end market. What are the puts and takes there? What do you want to know more about on that business, how it's performing?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the September quarter is always an odd quarter because you've only got a couple of weeks as far as the new phone is concerned, right? And it is more supply driven than it is demand driven. So I think the commentary for the December quarter is going to be a whole lot more important than what they actually posted here for the quarter. And who knows, how much inventory they kind of really had to deplete potentially in China, so looking at sell-in versus sell-through. So there's probably a lot of moving parts as far as the September quarter was concerned in China. But it is going to be important because we saw some very good growth actually come from China in the June quarter. The belief was it was going to sustain into the September and December quarter. So we do want to hear from Tim Cook. We want to hear that enthusiasm as far as China is concerned. The expectation, again, was that it was going to be the base model that would really kind of drive the China demand. And again, we want to hear that from Tim Cook. But outside of that, also, when you look at the iPhone numbers, in its whole, it did miss as well. So again, what does that momentum for the Pro devices here look like for the December quarter relative to the September quarter, and especially in the U.S. and these Western markets? Yeah,
you listen, Angelo. You point out correctly, of course, that it's critical for Apple investors. They're going to be listening to that call because you do want to hear that all important holiday quarter. What do Apple execs have to say about the color and commentary they provide there? In terms of, listen, Another note that skeptics, of course, Angelo, have been bringing up, including on this program, is the AI story. And the skeptical take that they'll say Apple doesn't have an AI story, doesn't have the compelling AI strategy that perhaps other rivals do. Listen, you cover Apple. You're bullish on Apple. What is your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, and if you're a bear, or if you're a bull, you're probably not going to hear much convincing as far as the AI story is on this call, because that's just not the way Apple works, right? I mean, you typically have to wait for a developers conference or some sort of rumors coming out, ahead of that event, really to get any gauge on what they're doing on the AI side of things. So you're not going to hear much as far as the AI story is concerned. What you do want to hear is the tone from Tim Cook. Make sure he's enthusiastic about that AI story and convinced that they are going to get that AI story right going into 2020. 2026 ahead of that developers conference, because really that's really all we can hang our hat on right now as far as this call is concerned. But that being said, I mean, we do expect them to get this story right. It's 2 years in the making at this point in time. They're either going to get it right, with internally, with whatever internal initiatives that they've done. But more importantly, we do think that they've got to have a backup of a plan at this point in time. And whether or not that's, Gemini with Alphabet or something else, we do think that we need to hear something, at least from the perspective of the tone of Tim Cook, that he remains enthusiastic and positive that we are going to see an AI rollout in 2026.
Yeah, I do see the compare there now, Angelo, on the tape for that Q4 iPhone revenue. 49.03 billion. Your colleagues on the street consensus, Angelo, was closer to 49.33 billion. So that did undershoot there. We're going to have to listen on the call in terms of the puts and takes the execs see now and ahead. What about the services revenue, Angelo? Listen, investors also pay attention to that. Faster growing, higher margin. That looks like it did beat, as you point out. So 28.75 billion, analysts 28.18 billion. What are you modeling for that division looking ahead?
So we've been modeling, for the most part, about 12 to 13% consistent growth here, going into 2026. Again, we need to hear something along the lines of that from Tim Cook. It has been a bright spot here for the company for years now. And there was some concern earlier this year that maybe the services growth would not be able to sustain those levels, a lot because of the uncertainties, whether it be related to the Google search monopoly case or whether related to Epic Games and the outcome there. But that being said, for the most part, it seems like Apple has really kind of gotten the outcomes that they wanted at this point in time. And services growth should continue, we think, to at the very least grow at about a 12 to 13% pace here, we think, over the next couple of quarters.
Angelo, always appreciate that instant analysis, sir. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me, Josh.